It's interesting how many come to appreciate sauna from the cold, and conversely, how many come to appreciate the cold from sauna. Whichever the point of introduction, Jesse and I agree that with cold plunge and sauna, 1 plus 1 equals 3. You'll hear from Jesse why this is, and we will hear about his personal journey toward the powerful goodness of breath work and cold exposure. For most all Finns and sauna lovers in Nordic regions of Europe and similar climates in North America, we refer to a few sauna rounds and a jump into a nice cold lake as just something you do. The practice is built into the rhythm of the day. I'm going to cut the grass and then go sauna. Or, hey, the sauna will be hot around 5 p.m. Come on by. Yet for athletes looking for an edge, or folks stressed out, or others with a varied list of mental or physical issues, we are seeing some serious positivity with contrast therapy. Jesse's bio. Jesse Coomer is an author, professional breath worker, and cold training expert. He's a certified Wim Hof instructor, personal trainer, and a professor of English at Vincennes University in Indiana. He's also a voice of practicality in the world of breathwork and cold exposure on his YouTube channel called Midwestern Method. On a personal note, Jesse and I share a timeline. We each first learned about Wim Hof back in 2015, and we each followed our own path into the Wim Hof method and all of its goodness. You can hear my interview with Wim on the same Sauna Talk podcast. Jesse was one of the first in a handful of certified Wim Hof instructors in the U.S. His passion for living well through breath work and cold exposure comes through really well in this interview. And Jesse has 2 ebooks available on his website, and links are in the show notes, A Practical Guide to Breath Work and A Practical Guide to Cold Training. Well worth it for those of us interested in diving in deeper into the cold and into the goodness. So without further ado, please welcome Jesse Coomer to Sauna Talk. This show is brought to you by Nice Mug. Nice Mug is the only mug made entirely out of ice. For more information, go to nicemug.com and enter the coupon code SAUNA for 10% off your entire purchase. Well, here we are, and it's getting cold. I want to welcome you to another episode of Sauna Talk, and really pleased here. Jesse Coomer comes to us from Ohio. Is that right, Jesse?
Actually, I'm from Indiana, but our mutual friend, Louis Lambert, he is in Ohio, and he recommended that we meet up. So yeah. Just tip of the hat to Louis. And but yeah, I'm in Indiana, so okay. About the southern area of Indiana here in the Midwest.
Right on. And Jesse, you kind of come to this idea of contrast therapy. You could say maybe I'm coming to it from the heat, and you are coming to it from the cold. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's wind the clock back.
Yeah. Let's take that back just a little bit. And if you would have told me, 10 years ago, hey, first of all, there's a thing called temperature training, right? That's even a thing. I would have just laughed in your face. Like the idea that if you put the human body into extremes, that there can be positives or anything, just anything at all, other than you're shivering or you're sweating, right? No, there's no way. But what happened for me, actually, just to kind of give you a little background on I guess my story, I was a couch potato, I really had a hard time with anxiety and stress, and it led me to a lot of bad things, drugs, alcohol, all these things. I was always seeking comfort, and this is something that it really just kind of dominated my life, to try to avoid discomfort. And whenever I was in my late 20s, I decided to make a change. And so I realized that no matter how far or how hard you try to run from discomfort, it's always going to chase after you. And what I always wondered was why it is that, a lot of these things that cause discomfort are what people encourage me to do. Like the first thing I really tried was exercise, which I had tried to avoid that as much as I could early on. And what you're doing, of course, you're stressing your body. And if you stress your body in the right amount, you get stronger, healthier, faster, all these great benefits, your cardiovascular system, all these things, they improve. And I started to do that. I started to notice benefits. And then I tried to get into meditation, but let me tell you, I was terrible at it. and so I started researching things, kind of got into, just stumbling on things online. And I came across an article, and it was titled, "Learn to Influence Your Immune System Consciously." And I thought, okay, this is just a bunch of woo-woo nonsense. And I, of course, clicked on it, though. Of course, I clicked on it because that's what I do. It's like, I'm going to go ahead and click on it. I'll pass judgment. It's kind of, I don't know if anybody listening can relate to this, but, sometimes you just kind of have to see the weird side of the internet. Well, it turned out that there was this guy, and they were interviewing him. His name was Wim Hof. And he not only was capable of enduring up almost 2 hours of straight ice to skin ice bathing, but he had gone to science, and he had shown that we're capable of influencing our autonomic nervous system and therefore our immune system. This blew my mind. And this is what got me into these things where, okay, a cold shower, an ice bath, they're not comfortable, but the way the body responds is incredible. And so I started really into the cold. That's been the thing that it really got me into realizing that we as human beings need stress. We need stressors. Obviously, I think stress just in general, of course, it gets a bad name, right? Because we were under chronic stress. A person goes to work, they drive to the office, they do all these things. And, we feel that effect of chronic stress in the modern world, especially because it's just all around us. But what we also know is that there are certain stressors that lead to a process called hormesis. And this is the strange thing about living creatures, that if you give a little bit of stress, or just right, it has to be enough. It can't be too much. But if you give us just the right amount of stress, we become stronger. And so my first foray into that was with the cold and with breath work. And then I realized, well, okay, there's these things called saunas and steam rooms out there. And so I started experimenting with those as well. Now, I haven't gotten as far as, I'm gonna have to ask you some questions, because I really am interested in, I love, actually just January of this year, before all this craziness happened, I was in Poland, and then I was also in, where was that? Prague. And so, especially in Prague, there were all kinds of saunas everywhere. And it was just awesome. And so just going back and forth between the sauna, or in my case, I've got a steam room at the gym that I go to. I use that a lot too. So I go back and forth, and you just feel amazing.
Right. So
Um,
hey Jesse, staying with the chronology, back to that article,
yeah,
just to put some timestamps on that. When about
yeah.
was that article?
That was back in 2014.
Hmm.
And at that time, I know you've had Wim on your podcast before, and at that time, though, Wim wasn't as popular, and not as many people had heard of him. And in fact, the few people that I told, because it was just so weird, right? It was just this thing that the average person couldn't really I could barely wrap my head around. And my wife thought, is this like some kind of internet cult you're joining? Or, there's all these weird, attributes to it. But I stuck with it. I love the fact that there are certain things that are measurable about these things. Cold exposure, there's certain measurable things about them. And there, in breath work, there are certain things that over time you can see measured results, and immediately, obviously, you feel
Right.
it, and
And to
immediately.
interject on that, that's what I wanted to ask you is, so you read the article, and just take us briefly through the next thing after reading the article. Was it a cold shower?
Oh yeah.
Did you feel it right away? How did you ease yourself into cold exposure and breath work?
Well, this is actually what happened was I searched the internet. I was like, okay, how can I learn this Wim Hof method for myself? And I found that actually at that time they had just come out with a 10-week internet course that you can take, and you can learn the Wim Hof method. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna take the plunge. We're gonna do this. And so I started that, and I did the breath work. The breath work feels amazing. You just feel incredible. And then I thought to myself, well, I guess I'm ready for a cold shower. Easy, because I did this breath work. I probably won't even notice. Well, I walked to the shower, and it's almost embarrassing to say this story, but I walked to the shower and I turned the knob, and as I was turning, I said, Wim Hof, almost like some kind of incantation or something like that. I was like, okay, here's my power, Wim Hof. And I turned it, and the cold water hit my skin, and it was almost like in the cartoons where the skeleton leaves the body. And I just didn't like the cold at all. Absolutely hated the cold. And I was like, okay, there's no way. How is anybody going to do this? And so for a long time, I just did the breath work. But
Mhm.
eventually, one day, I decided I've got to get into this. And so I went to the shower one day. Actually, it was after I had done some mowing. I'd mowed the grass, and I have always had lifelong allergies my whole life, seasonal allergies, all kinds of allergies. And so year round, I normally take medicine. But if anybody listens to this, and you have allergies, a lot of times, even though you're taking medicine, you still feel terrible. And so I was just in an awful way. And I walked in and I said, I'm going to try this cold shower thing. And so I went into the shower, and I started warm, and I kind of just slowly went a little bit more cold, a little bit more cold. And I didn't even get all the way cold that day, but I found my place. And I found a place where I was uncomfortable, but I could tolerate it. It wasn't, and so then the next day I came back, and the next day I came back, and before you know it, I'm taking completely cold all the way to cold showers. The seasons are starting to change. I'm getting into the fall. Before you know it, the colder the outside temperatures, the colder the water I could handle. And before you know it, I was taking 10-minute cold showers every single day and loving it.
So now,
And
hey, Jess, so if you
yeah,
were to go back to that moment, and I wanted to get some fresh insight for those listening who haven't
right,
reached that point yet, and I know you do a lot of coaching and teaching. So so with that
right.
fresh in your mind, share with us in very brief fashion 2 or 3 quick tips for someone listening here who says, yeah, I get it. this cold thing, I really want to get into it. Take us back to that moment. Knowing what you know now, 2 or 3 quick tips for newbies wanting cold
Yeah.
exposure.
Okay, great. So my first tip is the very first thing, and I cover this actually in an ebook that I wrote called A Practical Guide to Cold Training. But the most important tip that I would give everybody is you have to decide right then and there that you're going to love the cold. And I know that sounds, I know it sounds like a big ask, but you have to decide. And because as long as you are resisting the cold, as long as you are trying to grin and bear it and grit your teeth and things like that, you're never going to see progress. What's really going to make you see progress is say, I am voluntarily doing this because I want to do it. So that's tip number one, decide to love the cold. And then the second tip is to always be safe. So always choose a safe way to experience the cold. So for instance, we were just talking before we started recording, you live near a bunch of lakes, and I would not suggest, in the middle of February for a person to go to the middle of a lake that is frozen over and jump in without ever trying cold exposure. No, you want to try something where especially you're not outside, a place where you can adjust that temperature if you want to, or you can just simply step outside. I always recommend cold showers or cold baths to start, but you want to make sure you're in a safe place because you are dealing with a potentially lethal force. Hypothermia is a real thing. And so it's generally not going to be a problem as long as you just take some steps to make it safe. So always be safe, err on the side of caution. And then the third one really links back to the first one, but I like to say them separately oftentimes because when I coach people, I want you to make it into a joyful experience. And one of the things that I really, and this is not something everybody intuitively thinks to do, because you see the people meditating in the snow. So much of the talk around cold training, and I don't disagree with it, but so much of the talk about cold training is that it's very meditative, very peaceful and serene, and I don't disagree with that. However, it's important, I think, to make it fun. So I would recommend listening to music, and just something that's enjoyable. I used to listen to just silly, cheesy 80s rock, or, something that is just kind of fun, sing along. And it makes the whole experience better because you want to, basically, you're training yourself to look at the cold in a different way. And once you do that, you're going to see incredible benefits because you're going to progress a lot more. And really 90% of cold training is psychological. Yes, there is a physical element to it that you do need to be careful with, but the biggest thing you're training in the cold is your mind. So keep that in your mind, I guess I should say.
And to that point right there, the point number 3, make it joyful. That's where the community aspect comes in, where there's this camaraderie and, team effort and coaching like you do. It brings it back. It brings it away from that one-on-one exchange with the cold and more of a collaborative aspect.
Exactly. And that's just like this podcast, right? No longer is it just one person sitting and enjoying a sauna or for me, a cold bath. If you've got camaraderie, you're not just the weirdo who's doing this weird thing anymore. I always like to say that other ice bathers or any kind of trainer of this kind, right? When we're dealing with positive stressors, that were the right kind of weird. It's not necessarily what everybody would just first think of, but it's something that when you find other comrades, when you find other people, it's a lot more fun. You're safer because there's other people there. And so you do push each other, but you also watch out for each other.
Right on, man. Well said. Staying with the chronology, take us further. Take us a little further. 26.
So what happened? Yeah. So what happened after that is I started this online course, and I really started to see some benefits. This old online course was 10 weeks long. And, we're talking about maybe it's early 2015 is when I started it. So I went that whole year of 2015 kind of practicing Wim Hof method and trying to learn how to meditate. And I found that I was starting to get really interested in breath work. I started to examine some pranayama and some other forms of breath work, and that helped me with my meditation. And then I got so into this stuff, so into it. My sister is a yoga teacher, and I was always telling her, "Hey, Wim Hof method, Wim Hof method." And she said, "Well, hey, why don't you go get certified to teach this stuff?" Well, at the time, there was no certification program. There was no way were no instructors. There was just Wim Hof, and he was over there in Europe. And so here I am in Indiana, and it was kind of a chance happening that I was able to learn about the very first ever certification that he was going to do. So I went on a message board and I asked, "Hey, if I go to Spain," because he does these excursions in the Spanish Pyrenees. I said, "If I go to Spain and I do one of these weeks with him, will that qualify me to teach his program?" Of course, it doesn't, but fortunately, there was an ice swimmer who was European, and she said, "Hey, guess what? Sign up for this because he's going to come over." And I was so excited because he was coming to the United States. And I told all the people I knew, and everybody was like, what's a Wim Hof? And I was like, of course, no one knows, no one cares, but I was really happy. So I went out and I trained, and this was in 2016. In May, I went out to Los Angeles and I trained with Wim Hof in the very first ever instructor program. And I was one of 20, there was about 25 or 27 of us there. And for the very first time I'd ever worked with Wim, and he was just incredible. And I met a lot of amazing people there as well. And then between May of 2016 and November of 2016, he gave us a bunch of things to work on. He said, "Okay, in November, we're going to do the master class. That's going to be a full week of we're going to test you. So I took a lot of time to train, took an enormous amount of ice baths. For a while, I was taking an ice bath every single day for 10 minutes. And we're talking temperatures of approximately right around 35 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And so very, very, very cold ice baths, especially when you consider, I know I talked to a lot of athletes who have taken ice baths as part of their training regimen, and maybe they were like, "Well, I was in one for a half hour at one time." And oftentimes there's a confusion on, okay, what is an ice bath? And so like an athletic ice bath is usually around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe as low as 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're talking a big difference here. And so I was training. I started using the steam room about this time. The gym, I'm an English professor is my day job. And so the gym at the university has a steam room. So I was like, "Oh, this is really great." And so I started doing contrast therapy. I started doing a lot of things with that. And I continue to learn more about breath work. So the way the human body and mind react to different forms of breathing. But in 2016 in November, I climbed a mountain barefoot, shirtless in freezing temperatures out in Colorado with Wim Hof and 25 other Americans, and became one of the very first ever in the world Wim Hof method instructors. and definitely the first class of American instructors. And so after that, that week was just amazing. There was one time, I mean, we just had all kinds of different kinds of challenges. One time we were told to go into basically a freezing lake. I mean, it was so cold that day that whenever we took off all our clothes, you know, except for our trunks and bathing suits, like your feet would stick to the sand on the beach because it was that cold. And so I couldn't wait to get in the water because I knew it was warmer, strangely enough, even though it was freezing. So we got in the water, but he didn't tell us how long we were going to be in there. He just said, get in. And so we really had to fall back on our training. And this is the whole purpose of it. You know, we had to realize that we're really capable of a lot more than we think we are. And that if we get out of our thoughts, get out of that thinking, problem solving part of our brain, and we get into just the more primal parts of our brain, the brain stem, the limbic system, those are the parts that can really, you know, keep us alive and of course keep us from freaking out. And that's normally what the biggest problem is anyway. So he got us out, and, you know, I forget exactly how long. There's different reports. Some people said it was 8 minutes. Some people said it was 14 minutes. You know, who knows how long it was. That's not the important part. But we got out, but we couldn't get dressed though. So here we were in this freezing air, and of course wind chill started to really take effect. Hands and feet were pretty much unusable, and we started, you know, to do a breathing meditation just right then and there in this freezing air. And we started doing certain breathing techniques to warm the body. And eventually we could put on our clothes. And I will say that it was to the point where your focus had to be 100%. You couldn't lose that focus, because if you did, you would just, I mean, probably pass out. We just had so much laser focus. But we eventually got those shoes on. I'm telling you, socks are hard to put on whenever your feet and your hands don't work. But basically that was a big crucible. And then after that, I went out into the world and started, especially in the Midwest, started to train people in Wim Hof method. And that was just an amazing thing.
Fabulous. Thank you for that story. When did the book come out? A Practical Guide to Cold Training.
So fast forward to 2019. So actually almost exactly 1 year ago, I put out my first ebook, and I haven't published it in paperback form, and I've got a lot of requests, so I may work on that in the near future, but it is available on my website, A Practical Guide to Cold Training. And the biggest reason for that was there are an enormous amount of questions that come with cold training. And ideally, so if we're talking ideally, you use your intuition to guide you. But there's, especially here in the West, we have, I mean, there's all sorts of questions. We want some kind of guidance. And I felt like there needed to be some kind of a manual, something that was, first of all, cheaper and more available than me, right? So when it comes down to it, for $25, you get my training manual, and it's as if I'm there giving you guidance, and you can go at your own pace, as opposed to, you know, either training with me personally or training with me online or anything like that. You kind of get to go on your own pace. The thing is, so often, we, especially when it comes to the cold, we do need some guidance, and we need some kind of, okay, first of all, why am I doing this again? and that's one of the things in the first part of the ebook that I cover. And I don't go into insane, it's not like I'm wanting to write a science book here, but there are some incredible benefits to training in the cold, and a few of them, and I cover them. I'll give you some links in the ebook as far as some studies that have been done. But one of the biggest one is, and of course, we all are familiar with the cold and how it's a powerful anti-inflammatory. And that's primarily the number one reason why most athletes use it. And it's so interesting because especially nowadays, whenever, we overuse the like things like ibuprofen, NSAIDs like ibuprofen and Advil and naproxen sodium and things like that. We overuse these things a lot, and there's a lot of negative side effects. And then, of course, nowadays with addictive opioids and drugs, it's nice to be able to have something that we can use that is going to be consistent. It's going to work every time, and it's not harmful or addictive. I mean, it's addictive in a way, right? but cold exposure, it's one of these special things that they've shown that your brain will produce norepinephrine in pretty much the exact same way for as long as you are in the cold. So for instance, if you've taken a painkiller or some kind of a medicine, oftentimes there is a law of diminishing returns. After a month, after, X amount of time, yes, you'll get benefits, but it's not the same as you're going to have to up the dose, or you're going to, there's something like that's going to happen. So with cold exposure, it's not like that, especially with regards to norepinephrine. And of course, in the States, we call it noradrenaline. It depends on what paper you're reading. It's the same thing. And this chemical in the brain, it does a lot of things. It heightens our senses and awareness. It wakes up our brain quite literally. It makes us more attentive. It's been linked to the ability to focus and learn better. There's a lot of those things, but it's also an incredibly powerful anti-inflammatory. And every time you get into a cold shower, if it's the same temperature for the same amount of time, you're going to get the same dose of norepinephrine, according to research that's been done, which to me, that's just incredible. That's something you can rely on for a long period of time for the rest of your life if you want to, and you're going to get that same dose. So it's really amazing in that respect. There's a ton of other things that it helps as well. I don't want to go on and on, I guess, on this one fact, but with the book, though, I wanted to give people a reason why to train and then some guidance. So how should I prepare to walk if I want to do barefoot in the snow? Do I just go out there and just do it? No. First of all, the answer is no. Don't just walk out there day one in the snow. You do need to train for that. Yes, the mind is probably, it really is the biggest part, but there are some ways to train the mind. So we do need to train ourselves to let go of that fear that causes us conflict. And then also we do need to train our circulatory system, we need to train our body to be able to adapt to these more extreme ways of training.
Beautiful. Great. So if you were to wind that clock back, what did it feel like? You were probably one of only a couple dozen people in North America to know about the Wim Hof method, and certainly B, train with Wim Hof. How does it feel for you personally, Jesse, to see the explosive interest and growth in the Wim Hof method and the celebratory status of Wim in a way, and this whole breath work, cold training? How do you feel on a personal level of this trajectory?
I feel incredibly grateful. And this was something, while I was doing it, I knew that it was something that was going to grow. If a couch potato, lazy person like myself can get into it, and I saw these really tangible benefits, both with a reduction of anxiety. I no longer take medications for my allergies anymore, especially because of the breath, especially because of the cold. That's the biggest thing that really just incredibly helped me with my allergies. But I knew at the time, I knew whenever I arrived in Los Angeles and I was meeting Wim Hof, I was like, this is something first of all, the whole world needs, but I knew that it was going to grow specifically because of how different Wim Hof is from a lot of the other gurus that came before him. And a lot of the other ones, it's something where you have to believe or say a certain kind of incantation, or there's some kind of mysticism or esoteric teaching it's involved, and then you can choose whether or not to believe it or whatever. But with Wim, it was different, and that's the only reason I started this whole thing in the first place, is just because I knew that, okay, science, first of all, I could feel it, but in addition to that, I could also see the science and say there's something there. So I feel really, really grateful that I was able to train with Wim, and that I am still able to be a part of the community, because it's such a beautiful and positive group of people. I've been smiling much bigger ever since. I mean, it's just been so awesome, and it's opened the door for a lot of other exploration. Like I always say that Wim Hof was my gateway drug, and it allowed me to really think, okay, well, wait a minute, there are positive stressors out there, and what else can I do with my breath? What else can I do with learning about how my biology, my physiology work, and what else is there? Because up until that point, I didn't understand, or I had never really heard of hormesis. I'd never really heard about how how breath can even affect anything. And so it led me to research these things even deeper on my own. So I would never have been able to write the books that I've been able to write and go in any of the other directions. In addition, I'm still a Wim Hof method instructor, proudly so. But I've been able to even expand from there, and I never would have been able to do that had I not met Wim Hof and became an instructor.
Beautiful.
So I'm still very happy.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I can relate. I mean, on a personal level, right around that same time, I must have read the same article, to be honest. And I knew intuitively that it works for me, because I had been dancing around a lot of the elements of the Wim Hof method, including, we talked about this cabin where we're doing this recording. I'm on an island in the north of Minnesota, and my morning was always with the cold. I would do, and oddly enough, push-ups. I try to get 40, 50 push-ups up at the end of the dock as a precursor to jumping in the cold lake. And I mean, much to your story, Jesse, I mean, that the whole, I needed somebody like him to kind of put some process to what was kind of dancing around in my personal world, with sauna, with cold lakes, with some sort of exercises. The breath retention was really new, but like you said, I mean, it's something that clicked with you, and you saw results immediately. And I love how you frame up about how it's not really a guru thing. I mean, like, everybody can find their own place, with the breath work and the cold. These are two things that are quite bluntly, they are free, the air and the cold.
I've always loved that. Right? I've always loved the fact that it's free. It's not like you have to, wait for it to go on sale, or wait for, what is it, the Amazon Prime Day, or any of these, whatever they are. You already have the ability to breathe. You already have, at least in most of us do, have some access to the cold, especially here in the Midwest, and of course in the northern Midwest where you live. I mean, you get really cold out there. So I'm envious.
Yeah, well, hey, you know what? You could come on up, man. So come up and see us. So I was thinking of you last night, and I got a crazy question for you. Is cold? Meaning, I came out of the sauna. We're on this island. It's really cold. The leaves are coming down. That lake is getting, I call it, great serving temp. It's a beautiful serving temp in the water. as I was in the lake, I dove right off the dock. I do this multiple rounds through my sauna experience. I was thinking about our visit today, and I wanted to ask you is, hanging out in cold lake water, let's just say the temperature is the same at 40 degrees, and then an ice bath, a 100-degree ice bath, 40 degrees. Is 40 degrees in your opinion? Or do you think that the water in cold is different where you do it?
I love this question. This is so good. Okay, so the whole goal, anytime I make an ice bath, and the thing is, it's expensive to do an ice bath every single day. You're buying a lot of ice, or you have to buy an ice machine. So I've converted a deep freeze into a cold plunge, and I get into that, and there is a difference between that and getting into an ice bath where it's literally ice with water, or going into a lake or a creek. And yeah, it's so weird. And I know, technically you can measure the temperature, right? You can measure, okay, it's 40 degrees or it's whatever. But there is something different about it, because you jump in now. Okay, and I could think this through. I could even bring out all the permutations and all the calculations, right? Well, the air temperature, and then there's the the breeze, and so you've got the wind chill, and these are all things that I think it's important to bring up, right? Because you do have to face these things. But there is something about getting into a natural body of water that it's special. And what I have found, and this is weird because I love the way you pose this, because I have found that when I get into, maybe it's even colder, the water's even colder in nature, that for some reason it feels like I'm able to adapt faster. And I don't know what it is. It's like, it's almost more irritable in a controlled environment, and you get in this natural environment and you're like, here's my natural habitat,
Yes, sir.
I think that if anybody, obviously you want to train in those controlled environments early on, because, or at least if you're going to train in a natural body of water early on in your training, have people with you, or don't go to where it's like insanely cold on your first day. But man, that is the best. There is nothing that beats nature. It literally is the best, whether it's, just in general, but you get into that frozen over lake, you cut the hole, or you get into the stream. And I will say, the danger is you want to stay in a little longer than maybe you should.
Yes. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you for, I cannot agree anymore to that. And I think if I could just project, what we're doing is we're getting back to our primal state, right? Like,
Yes.
this is the whole thing where, Wim talks about this quite frequently, where it's only been in the last, couple hundred years or even 100 years where we have created this softness to our climate. Every minute of every day of every year is 68, 70 degrees, and we are not instituting any stress within our life, and
Right.
so the idea of this primal extreme is best realized in nature, of course,
Yeah.
exactly what you say. And so, I don't know if it's psychological or metaphysical or physical or some combinations thereof, but I find exactly what you say. I find the cold in a lake, a cold lake, to be much more intense, number one, but also much more rewarding, and I'm less prone to want to get out.
Yeah.
I develop a comfort level with that because it's natural, maybe. I don't know. Is a bag of in a 100-gallon tub natural? Probably, but it just feels different to me. So
I like leaving it up a little bit to mystery there. I like saying, if nothing else, I know it's special, right? And I can say that for sure. But I think there's, there's research now to show that forest bathing is something that, reduces cortisol levels. It's something that strangely enough, we just naturally seem to be innate. When we're in nature, we're more comfortable. And I think there is something about that. And it could be something like receiving bottom-up signals from our autonomic nervous system, that maybe things are not the way they should be whenever you're always in a square box, or the square houses or whatever. And maybe there's something that is deep inside saying, the feeling of that sand underneath your bare feet, there's something good about that. You need that too. Beautiful. I love embracing that. I'm okay with the mystery. I don't need to know. I can feel it.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very well said. I love the mystery. We can accept the mystery and rejoice in it. One more thing that is against that, I want to ask you from a technical standpoint. If when you're cold, say your body is obviously quite a bit warmer than the cold water surrounding you. Is it true in stagnant cold that we are building like this cocoon or this little layer around us? And
it is.
The secondary question to that is, if you go into a moving water stream, that's different. I mean, am I reading that as mental, or that's the real deal, isn't it?
No, that's the real deal. And I've gotten in trouble because of this. So, and whenever I'm writing these books, one of the things I'm trying to help people do is not make the same mistakes as me, and whether you're doing Wim Hof method, or whether you just want to do cold training, or you just want to do, different forms of breath work, there's a lot of things that I've learned, the hard way. And one of them was, I'll never forget, I hadn't been able to train in any natural body of water for months. And I finally got the chance to go to this really nice creek. And it was nice and deep. I could get up to my shoulders. And I told my brother-in-law, of course, he had never really done any cold training or anything. I said, okay, why don't you time me? I'm just going to go for 10 minutes. Well, at the time, I had been doing 10 minutes a day in a tub. And I had been doing, we're talking maybe 35, 40 degrees. I mean, super, a lot of ice. But it is true that you build a small layer of warmer water. I mean, it's not going to get hot, folks, but it gets warmer. And whenever you're in moving water, that just gets blown away. It's like wind chill. Yeah. And I was there and I said, okay, tell me whenever it's 5 minutes past, and then tell me when the 10 minutes past. Well, I didn't want to get out. I was like, I haven't been able to train in natural habitat for a long time. So I really want to stick with this. So I got to 5 minutes and I started feeling kind of cold, and I started kind of, man, I gotta stay in this. My brother-in-law's watching me, and I, all those ego things that we should never do. Right. But, and so I eventually started feeling warm again, which is terrible. And I go over this in the ebook, and I talk about how there's the danger zone, and, or there's the safety zone, and then there's the danger zone, and then there's the death zone, right? And the death zone is where you're going to need medical help. Well, the danger zone, I was very much in the danger zone. I was on the very edge of the danger zone, getting closer to the death zone, and I didn't even realize it. And that's why it's really important for a person to understand there's some things you need to understand about cold training. Well, because I was like, well, I've been doing 10 minutes a day, but it was that one difference. The water probably wasn't even as cold as the water I was sitting in that 100-gallon tub, but it was moving. And I got out of that, and instantly I started to feel a drain in all of my energy. I was suffering from very, very extreme after drop, and just felt terrible the rest of the day. And after drop is something you never want to feel.
Can you explain for listeners after drop?
Yeah. So the way the body works, it's incredible how it will defend you from this cold force. And your natural defense is the skin, and you've got an enormous amount of little capillaries there. So they will close, and they'll prevent that coldness from penetrating into your organs and your vital parts. And then what will happen is, though, it's going to hold a little bit of that blood on the surface. So there's all these tiny little, very cold little pinpricks of blood, but there's millions and billions of them on your skin. And then what happens is, and this happens whenever you get out of a cold shower or anything, but the degree of extremeness varies depending on how cold of water you were in and how long you were in. And what happened for me, whenever I was experiencing after drop, and if you experience after drop, what happens is you've been in for so long that you've built up an enormous amount and your body just wasn't able to keep it out. It started to creep in already. Mm-hmm. And then you get out, and then the cold, that cooled blood from your extremities starts to circulate into your core, and then your actual core temperature drops. And this is a miserable experience, everybody. You don't want to feel it. And it's funny, I've even seen people feel it in a sauna, because what happens is if you go from the cold state to the hot state too fast, it opens up those capillaries, mm-hmm. and all of that cold, that cooled down blood will speed, it goes a lot faster to your core. And I've seen people shiver just uncontrollably in the same, sauna that other people are sweating in. Right. But it's easy to avoid. It's just, you can't let your ego get in the way. And if you have a training manual, it does kind of keep you from pushing yourself to those extremes quite so often.
Thank you. So I wrote an article about sauna and cold plunge, and I say, there's this, I said, with sauna and cold plunge, 1 + 1 = 3. And I find this, and I wondered if you would like to riff on that, Jesse. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. Well, and it really comes back. There's some real benefits to going back and forth. One of the things we can bring it back to those capillaries on your skin, and you and I we're human beings. All of us are human beings. We normally are in temperature controlled boxes all of our lives. And we don't get those extremes that would give us the training stimulus to make us have a stronger reaction to hot and cold, and strengthening those capillaries has an enormous benefit. In some people that I've trained, they've seen an improvement in blood pressure. Not everybody, but some people have seen an improvement because of that circulation change. But what I love to do is I love to go back and forth for both those purposes, but also because it feels so amazing, right? You just feel good, and you're just compounding all these happy chemicals and endorphins and all this. I mean, you get an enormous rush of all these happy chemicals. So it's awesome to take an ice bath. It's awesome to take sauna or a steam room. But yeah, if you've got both of them, I don't know how many times I've just spent, over an hour many times, most times, about an hour going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now, steam room is what I normally use. So it's kind of intense, so you don't normally get quite as long of a session as maybe with a sauna, right. But yeah, they're just feels amazing.
Right on. Some of the principle to what you're speaking about has to do with, people often ask me, or, that's a common question, yeah. How long in the sauna? And to me, everybody is different. And right. What the best answer for me is there's a good answer actually, is when the idea of an ice cold lake plunge is about the best idea you've ever had.
I like that. I mean, we can all relate to it.
That's my buddy Clint's answer, but I answer it a little bit. I can answer that way that's as accurate as an answer as I can give. But there is another answer, and that's that you want your core completely heated up, and this gets me on a soapbox about good sauna. And when you have a good sauna that is properly, ventilation, really good heat, the right kind of steam that is not scorching you, but making you feel this feeling of fulfillment. Mm-hmm. You're able to stay in the hot room much longer. And by doing that, your core body temperature is raised equally and uniformly and feeling great. So that's a springboard for a really good cold plunge, because then the inverse is going to happen. Something that you know so very well is that, that endorphin experience of the body, like really, your heart rate just going down, that primal
Yes.
state of that we experience, in the cold. So yes, it's a compound of happy chemicals, as you say, and it just feels so damn good. And then,
Yeah.
like in another wonderful line that you have is, maybe we don't need some of these scientific answers to prove to us that what we know to be good for us
Oh yeah.
is there, right?
Well, it's you can feel it. That's the thing that um I mean, I think one of the reasons why we don't often take care of ourselves or eat right, for instance. Yes, you can feel the difference whenever you're eating healthy versus not healthy, but it's not as immediate or oftentimes as profound as if you've had one of these extreme temperatures acting on you. Um, I think the immediacy of temperature training is I love what you're saying, about having, yeah, we can look at the studies. There's all kinds of research done on sauna use, and there's all kinds of, I mean, and I mean, for longevity and for weight loss and metabolism and I mean, immune boosting, human growth hormone, all these amazing things that we can look at those studies. But you know what? People were in those a lot longer than we've even had science. And we've known there's something to this, right? You look back, people used to prescribe cold exposure or go to a sweat lodge or, all these things that there was a lot of times a spiritual connotation to it as well, because we knew there was something deep down, right?
Yeah.
There's something about it that it's just right. And so, no, I hear you.
Cool.
It's great to have the science, but having the experience is paramount.
Well said. Do you want to ask me anything, or in a
Well,
secondary?
yeah, I want to know what you do, because I mean, if I lived on this awesome island, so tell me what is your sauna routine like, or do you have a routine, or does it have is it regular, or what's a regular day, I guess, for you
Sure.
with your sauna?
Yeah, it, it's even more paramount. A routine is even more paramount during the time of Corona for me,
Yes.
because since the ice went out on our lake in early May, I've been up here. The only times I've left the north here of northern Minnesota is to drive sauna stoves back to Minneapolis. So every night since early May, I've been up here, with the exception of 3 2-night trips down to Minneapolis, where I brought some
Okay.
down for people and stuff. And those were calm interruptions to my routine. But I have a sauna in my backyard in Minneapolis. So this, to answer your question, I've fallen into this sort of cycle of every other day. I
Okay.
mean, and I'm not too embarrassed to tell you that there's a lot of times up here where I have to really even look on the wall to see, what day it is. And that's the truth. It's just been really crazy with Corona. My day
Oh
job
yeah.
kind of slowed down to a trickle, if that at all. And I mean, I don't know a Saturday from a Tuesday often, and it's really great therapy for me on a personal level. So yeah, so every other day I've sort of fallen in. There are days where I sauna 2 days in a row or whatever, but generally it just seems to be like today is not a sauna day because we're having guests over for dinner and this and that. But I just know that I can go without today because I
Okay.
had this awesome experience yesterday, and I'm going to have an awesome experience tomorrow. Like I will bet you $1,000 that I will be sitting on the sauna bench somewhere between 5 and 6 p.m. tomorrow. Exactly what I was doing last night at this time. So what every other day sauna routine looks like for me, it's that whole, chopping wood, carrying water parable, in a way where there's nature involved. There's usually work involved with, maybe it's chopping firewood. I'm rebuilding, some railings on our deck to the sauna guest house, so some work
Nice.
involved. And then a hike in nature. Often I'll light up the sauna stove, and my wife and I will go hiking in the woods, and do that, forest bathing thing that you referenced. And then
Yes.
come back, and I know my sauna stove so well because I use it so frequently, and I have it tuned so efficiently and so well that I know usually when I get back, it's 160, 180 Fahrenheit, somewhere in there. And then I'll pull the coals forward, throw another log on, maybe head up to the cabin and grab my iPad with all my tunes, often a beer,
Yes.
have a beer as a reward, because you got to
There
earn,
you go.
you know,
Oh,
big thing of water, and then see you later, honey. Off I go to sauna, and it's
that's awesome.
usually an hour and a half or 2 hours, comprised of three, most often four cycles. Through the sauna and then down to the dock and swim, and just chill out, man. Like there
Yeah.
are no rules for me with sauna. I just go with flow. Since you asked, I find a sweet spot for me is generally like 5 o'clock, 5 to 7, somewhere in there,
Okay.
a couple hours. And that's a sweet spot for me, Jesse, because I get, I don't, just like with exercise, it's not good to sauna, and probably same for cold plunge, on a full stomach or
Yeah.
when you're really hungry.
Yeah.
It's like exercise. And that's a good time of day for me because after sauna, I mean, food tastes so much better, like
Yeah.
uh,
Oh yeah.
a big meal, like after sauna. And then I can find it's sort of like this nice runway into a mellow evening, do
Yeah.
some reading, whatever it takes. And then, to bed at 10 o'clock, 10:30.
Oh
So,
yeah.
so there's a
Now,
long-winded answer, man. You asked. So there's my
yeah. Well, no, it's not long-winded. You've been listening to me this whole time. I'm long-winded. I'm the breath worker though, so it's like, okay, there's my excuse. But why would you do every other day? Why not every day?
I love it so much. You know what I mean? I just love it so much. There's this weird like restraint. It's like, I don't know, maybe it's like intermittent fasting or something where
Yeah. Okay.
it tastes better. There are days where I'll go every day. I don't know, man. I call me strange. I just think that there's something really cool about. I tell you what, tomorrow morning I wake
Yeah.
up and I know it's a sauna day, and I literally jump out of bed with a little,
Oh, I like that.
yeah, it's just me. Call me weird. I don't know.
No,
It's
I
something
think
about
that's
it.
kind of cool, and that's something that I typically take an ice bath every day, but now I will say with Corona, all of my routines kind of fell apart because I'm a English professor by day, and then so I'm usually here at this place at this time, and I talk to this person, and then I do this. All those things fell apart, and so I've been working on my book, and then my son, he stayed home for 2 months that I had to teach him preschool. So a lot of those things. Now I got to say one thing about skipping days, though, it will definitely intensify the next one, and I can see. I mean, there is a certain satisfaction. It's like, yeah, I got it in today. So I can definitely see, and there's a lot of arguments for not doing exposure training every day too. Some people are really lockstep with it, and some people, when I need it, I need it. When I don't need it, I don't need it. And I've been a little bit more like that lately. Um,
Do you
just with
do what time of day do you do WIM? Do you do it right when you wake up, or out of bed and coffee first, or how does it roll for you?
Yeah. So for me, I do Wim Hof method, and then I've expanded, right? So I do breath work a lot of different times of the day. So for an average day, I'll wake up, and this is the thing that gets me out of bed, a lot like whenever you have a sauna day. But every morning I get up and I do a form of breath work called Bostrika. And Bostrika, I describe two different variations of this in my new book, Practical Guide to Breath Work. But I do that every morning. I do about 3 rounds of that. And then I go into a super ventilation routine. Generally, I'll go into Wim Hof method breath work. And I don't even really have a number of how many times, but I know that I have until my son wakes up to do my breath work. So whenever he wakes up, he'll come in, and I'll be sitting there. A lot of times he'll sit down in my lap while I finish my last round or whatever. And then it's time for breakfast and coffee and things like that. And so then after that, I'll usually take a shower. And if it's summertime, I'll just take pure cold shower. But when it gets super cold in the winter, I'll do a warm or I'll walk in. So everybody shrieks whenever I tell them this, but I walk in there without turning on the water. So I get in the shower and I don't turn the water on, and then when I get in, then I turn the water to warm, but it's going to take a while before it gets warm. So I let myself have that morning shock, and then I let it go to warm, and then I'll finish off with cold. And then I go to work or I'll do whatever I do. And then usually I don't take an ice bath until about 7 p.m. So I wait till my son goes to bed. He's 5. I don't really want him to know about my ice chest right now, having these bodies of water, and is for safety purposes. So I wait till after he goes to bed. And usually, and the thing is, I used to time it, and this is something in the ebook, the cold training ebook. The ultimate goal, which I believe it takes a little bit of guidance to get there, but the ultimate goal is to just listen to yourself. And I mean, that's what you're doing when you do sauna. I mean, that's what I do whenever I do ice baths. So I go out and I like Viking music or, something that gets me kind of in that spirit. And then I'll listen to that while I ice bath. And until I'm ready to get out, I listen to what I call in the book the inner voice. And it's basically the sense of introception. So I'm really listening to my body. And then I get out, and I generally, after that, I'll go to bed maybe around, if I'm lucky, I'll go to bed at 9. If I'm not lucky, I'll go to bed at 10. But I always go to bed feeling so good after an ice bath, because by the time it's a few hours later and I've expended a bunch of energy at that point, because you do. And I'm just so relaxed and so ready to go to sleep. The covers feel really good. And I drift off. And that's usually my routine. And some days I don't take an ice bath, but a lot of days I do. Most of the days.
A couple more questions.
Yeah.
Wrap up. So this kind of is a good transition, really. So my practice is easy in a way, sauna, and it's a gateway to the cold because it's so integral. It's actually quite interesting when you compare Europe and specifically the Nordic countries and Finland, even more specifically. Cold is always part of sauna. It's an integral thing. I mean, when you sauna, you do cold exposure. There's no question. In America, those health clubs and whatever, and in many places, California comes to mind, where people have seen or become exposed to sauna. Cold is not assumed. It's a health club, and as a matter of fact, there's a health club where my father and I used to go, and the shower, you couldn't control the temp. It was one of those where you push.
Oh my God.
So I'd be out there. They had like one of those garden hoses out by the pool, and I'd be using that as my shower. But that was getting on by the lifeguards. But the hell with that. I need that cold, right? So anyhow, it's an integral part, like the hot and the cold, sauna, cold. It's just done 100% of the time. But sauna, there's no friction, there's no resistance. How do you overcome? I know that you love it, right? You obviously love it. You've wrote, the book about this, and it's changed your life in such a positive way. But well, let me ask you this: like, do you find resistance where, hey, you're on the couch reading or just watching Netflix or whatever? What compels you, or how do you overcome the obstacle, whether it be the cold training or breath work? Because I find resistance to both. Cold, no problem with sauna. That's why 1 + 1 is 3. But I get a little lizard brainy at time to time.
Oh yeah.
Can you
advise,
for folks listening, how do you, or what would you advise for overcoming or getting there, pushing yourself to do it?
Well, and I think that's probably one of the most common questions I get is, usually the next question is, I guess you just don't feel cold anymore, or I guess, a lot of assumptions. And the reality is every single time I'm about to step into that cold bath or whatever cold exposure, there is trepidation and fear. So I've been doing this now for 5 years, almost 6 years of my life. And it's regular and it's constant. And that's important. But also, what happens to your brain after all this time is that you start seeing yourself as a person who can make difficult decisions because it is a difficult decision. I guarantee you, right now I'm thinking about, well, maybe I just won't do an ice bath tonight. And that's okay. It's okay to do that. And so, but tonight, after I eat a dinner, it helps me not eat a big dinner too. So I won't eat a big dinner that way. But then I'll put my son to bed around 7, and then I'll say, okay, next step, I know where I'm going. And so I try not to listen to the fear. It still will be there. But I know after practicing it long enough, that fear has it's got a few minutes. All it has on me is a few minutes. And then everything after that, I've got. And really, it's only got a few seconds. Even just those seconds might feel like minutes, but just a few seconds. And so I know that as I get on my trunks and I start listening to the music, I'm preparing to go into that cold. I know that if I slow my breathing down and I start to focus on, okay, whatever, I know that I can do this. This is something I've chosen to do. I know I've got this. And I've made all the right moves as far as safety and things. Okay, all it is just me getting into this uncomfortable situation that will not last forever. And intellectually, that helps. However, it's not about the intellect, really. The intellect is always going to fail you. And that's why you make that decision and you let it happen and you prove to yourself on a regular basis, I'm a lot stronger than I thought I was. I'm a lot more powerful. The cold is powerful. Yes. The heat is powerful. I mean, I've been in saunas where I'm just begging for mercy. You have to get to those uncomfortable places to get the benefits. It's just like when you go to the gym, you don't benefit from just walking around the gym and doing just enough reps so that, people see you do reps. No, you have to go to where you feel the burn to get any kind of benefit, because you're stressing the body and you get the benefit. Same thing even with when it comes to like certain breathing techniques, when it comes to breath holds to improve CO2 tolerance. There's a lot of things that we do when I train athletes with breath work that are uncomfortable. But if you consistently make the decision, you're going to see the results, and you start to see yourself as that person who can make that decision.
We talk about nature. You and I, we share this love of nature. And so I asked a couple quick rapid fire questions, Jesse.
Sure.
If you could have a mobile sauna and bring it anywhere in the world, where would you like? What's the first place that comes to mind for you?
Well, the lake you live on sounds pretty great. I would definitely want to be by a body of water. And I don't know if I have a specific place to be, but I would want to, if I could have that at my disposal. Yeah, I'm thinking camping. I'm thinking just really letting it happen. And I'm looking at a frozen lake with a hole in it.
And if you could sauna with anybody in the world, in the past, the present, the future, dead or alive, who's the first person that comes to mind for you?
Oh, geez, that's a good one. That's a long list. I would say right now I would want to. There's a guy named Brian McKenzie. I would like to sauna with him just to pick his brain. He's into all the same stuff we're into.
Right on. And what do you think is most misunderstood about cold exposure, cold training, cold exposure specifically? We've referenced this a couple of times. Those that aren't, into it think we're crazy, right?
Right.
Let's say you've probably done this. You've probably spoken with the the people that haven't experienced it? What do you think is most misunderstood?
I think a lot of people think we do it to be macho or to, something like that. I think also, you were talking about this earlier. The average person sees a sauna or in a gym with no instructions, no teaching, nobody knows how to use these things. It's like, I guess I go in here and I get hot. They see an ice bath. They see, first thing they think of is the Polar Bear Club. I don't understand these people. They're weird. They're crazy. They have something to prove. Um, and I think there's just a big misunderstanding as far as the why and the how, because there's a method. You don't just go in there to get hot. Yeah, I'm not just going in there to get cold, I guess, on a very fundamental level. But this is why we need to educate people, and because I think this is something that everybody could benefit from. Heat and cold, I mean, it's so good for you in so many ways. So I think it comes down to education.
Beautiful. Any final words, Jesse? Love to visit with you, man. It's
yeah. Oh man, this has been. I could go for hours. I tell you what, I really do appreciate coming on, and again, thanks to Lewis for introducing us. I sent you some copies of my books, and I hope they have. Hope you've liked them. I know you haven't had time to read all of them or both of them, but if you're looking, if those people who are listening are looking for ways to get into the cold, a practical guide to cold training, and then my most recent book, A Practical Guide to Breath Work. It's available on Amazon now, and we have so much that we don't understand about our physiology and our biology. And of course, we were just talking about this. We don't have to have science to tell us that it's real. It's nice that we do have science, but when you experience it for yourself, then it really is real. So get into it. Hop in a sauna, then hop in a cold lake and go back and forth until you just can't stand it anymore. Right. And just get into it.
Right on, man. Well, super. Jesse Coomer, thank you for being on Sauna Talk. Again, a shout out, Louis Lambert, for suggesting this, and those listening, if you have guests that you would like for Sauna Talk, here's a great example. I have a new great friend, Jesse, and I will link in the show notes to both of Jesse's books, and encourage you to dialogue with him and keep it going. Jesse, I'll let you take us out. Any final word about you and I taking a sauna together one day, or any final word to listeners?
Well, I look forward to someday making it up to your area, and I want to. I'd like to experience. I always like experiencing what an expert in their field, right? This is how a sauna should feel, right? Whenever I make an ice bath, I'm like, hey guys, this is what an ice bath. I'm looking forward to that, and so I really appreciate getting the chance to connect with you. And thanks to your audience for listening, and I appreciate the opportunity.